In the brutal winter of 1872, Grace Blackburn fights to keep her young daughter alive after a wagon accident leaves them stranded in the deadly Sierra Nevada. With the storm closing in and hope slipping away, salvation arrives in the form of Bryson Calloway, a solitary mountain ranger whose quiet strength becomes their lifeline. As Grace heals in the warmth of his cabin and later builds a new life in Redding, unexpected threats force her to rely on Bryson once more. In the face of danger, betrayal, and the ghosts of her past, Grace discovers a love strong enough to reshape her future. The winter of 1872 wrapped the Sierra Nevada in a savage wilderness of ice and roaring winds, a place where even seasoned travelers hesitated to journey. But Grace Blackburn had no choice. Her wagon, carrying the last remnants of her life after her husband Jonathan's death, had been her hope for a new beginning in California. She'd planned to meet friends in Redding, people who had promised work and a roof over her head. Instead, the mountain trails swallowed her wagon wheel into a frozen rut, snapped the axle, and left her stranded just as the blizzard began its merciless descent. Snow lashed her face like needles as she pulled her trembling daughter, Emma, close beneath the torn wagon canvas. "Mama, are we going to die?" the little girl whispered, voice thin as wind. Grace swallowed her fear. "Not today, sweetheart. I promise you that." But her promise felt paper-thin against the storm's fury. Hours passed. The cold gnawed at their bones. The wind howled like a living thing. Grace burned the last scrap of firewood, then fabric from a ruined saddle, then bits of the wagon frame itself, desperate to keep Emma warm. She wrapped her daughter in every blanket she could find, then pressed her close, sharing her own heat. When the fire died again, Grace held Emma and prayed, not for miracles, but for strength to survive until morning. It was then, through the howling storm, that she heard it. Hoofbeats. For a terrifying moment she thought it might be raiders, or wolves. But the silhouette cutting through the swirling white was a tall man in a heavy coat, riding a strong black horse that pushed through the drifts with practiced power. Grace blinked, certain her mind was playing tricks. But he was real. He drew closer, reined in sharply, and called out through the wind. "Is anyone alive in there?" The voice was deep, steady, and human, more beautiful to Grace than any hymn. She pushed aside the canvas. "Please, my daughter, she's freezing." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion and knelt beside them. Snow clung to his dark hair, and his face was rugged, framed by a short beard that didn't hide the concern in his eyes. "I'm Bryson Calloway," he said, pulling off his gloves and checking Emma's pulse with gentle hands. "Sierra Ranger. I came across your wagon tracks before the storm covered them." His gaze swept over the scene, softening when it fell on Emma's blue lips. "You're lucky," he murmured. An hour more and the cold would have taken her. Grace's breath trembled with relief. She didn't know whether she thanked God or the man kneeling in the snow, but tears burned her eyes all the same. Bryson gathered Emma in his arms, wrapping her in his coat. He offered Grace a hand. "Your wagon's done for. My cabin's a mile out. Can you walk?" "We'll manage," Grace said, even though her legs felt like numb wood. He didn't question her pride. He simply kept close, breaking a path through the drifts, keeping them between him and the icy wind. By the time they reached his cabin, small, sturdy, smoke curling from the chimney, Grace felt like she might collapse. Warm air enveloped her as he ushered them inside. The scent of burning pine, leather oil, and something like coffee filled the space. Bryson set Emma near the fire, checking her fingers and toes for frostbite. Then he handed Grace a thick quilt. "You're safe now," he said quietly. And for the first time since Jonathan died, Grace believed it. The long road to healing. The blizzard lasted 2 days. During that time, Bryson cooked simple meals, stew, biscuits, coffee that Grace pretended to like, and showed Emma carved wooden animals he'd made during long winter nights. The little girl took to him instantly, giggling as he made them walk across the table. Grace watched them, something warm growing in her chest. Bryson was a quiet man, solitary by choice. He'd lost his younger brother to a mining accident years before and had since chosen a life of patrolling the mountains, helping travelers, and living where the silence didn't remind him of everything he'd lost. But Grace and Emma changed that silence. "I'll take you to Reading when the storm clears," he promised. "You'll have a proper place to stay." But when the storm finally lifted, and the world softened beneath sunlight shimmering on snow, Grace hesitated at his door. Emma tugged her hand. "Mama, can we stay? Just a little longer?" Bryson froze mid-motion. The hopeful glance he shot them was fleeting, but Grace saw it. She forced a gentle smile. "Let's get settled in town first, sweetheart." Bryson's jaw tightened as he helped them load his sled. "You'll be safe there. That's what matters." But Emma cried quietly the entire ride. Reading, a new beginning. Almost. Reading was bustling compared to the lonely mountains. Warm faces greeted them, and Grace soon found work at the bakery. Emma made friends. Life began to settle into something resembling peace. But trouble wasn't far. The man Jonathan owed money to, a ruthless trader named Harlan Pierce, tracked Grace down. He demanded payment she couldn't give and threatened to take Emma as collateral. Grace reported him to the sheriff, but Pierce had ways of slipping through the law. Terrified, Grace turned to the only man she trusted. Bryson arrived in town that night, riding fast, his eyes blazing when he heard what happened. "He won't touch you," he growled. "Not while I'm alive." And he meant it. Together, they confronted Pierce at his camp outside Reading. When Pierce reached for Emma, Bryson slammed him against a tree, his voice low, deadly. "You hunt widows and orphans," he said. "But you'll leave this one alone." Pierce backed down, humiliated, but defeated. Grace trembled, tears slipping free. Bryson stepped closer. "You don't have to fight this alone anymore," he whispered. She leaned into him without thinking. A home, a family, a future. From that night on, Bryson visited often. He repaired Grace's shutters, built Emma a sled, and walked them home after church. His quiet presence rooted itself in their lives like something that had always been missing. One warm spring evening, he found Grace watching the sunset. "I've been thinking about something," he said. She smiled softly. "You think about many things, Bryson Calloway." He took her hand, calloused, warm, careful. "You and Emma, you brought life back into my world. I'd like to build a home with you. Not because you need protecting, but because I want to be the man who stands beside you for the rest of my days." Tears filled Grace's eyes. "I never thought I'd love again," she whispered. "Then let me prove you can." Emma burst from the doorway and wrapped her arms around both of them. "Does this mean Ranger Bryson stays forever?" Bryson lifted her easily. "If your mother says yes." Grace laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times yes. Epilogue, the life they built. By summer, Bryson built a cabin near town, bigger than his mountain shelter, with a porch Grace filled with flowers and a room Emma decorated with drawings. The baker gifted wedding bread, the pastor married them under the oak tree, townspeople cheered as Bryson lifted Grace into his arms. Winters no longer frightened her. She faced them with a husband beside her and a warm fire crackling in their home. Their new life wasn't perfect, no frontier life was, but it was beautiful, filled with love, laughter, and the peace Grace once thought she'd never know again. And all because, in the deadliest winter of her life, a ranger rode out of the storm.